So before I start, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show a camera angle as though I was sitting in my chair here. Whoops. Gotta watch out for my cords. So this is the position that I'm sitting in my chair roughly. And so this would be my angle that I'm looking at the object from. So what I want to do is I just want to rotate this around a little bit. So it's more like this. To about that angle there. So that basically what I'm looking at here is a two-point perspective. Okay? This is the corner that's closest to me. If I take the line and draw it across here, this corner here would be the corner that's closest to me. So I've got perspective that's going off in this direction here, and I have perspective that's going off in this direction over here. Okay? Those are my two lines of perspective. So I want to establish where this corner is here first. Now, before I begin this, what I'm doing here is I'm setting up my camera in this position just to show you the angle that I'm looking at it from, similar to what you would be looking at your object on your desk from, in a 3/4 down view. Now, the first thing we have to remember is, where is your horizon line? Your horizon line is always at your eye level, right? So my eye level is up here. That's where my eye level is right now. If I hold the camera right up beside my eye, there's my eye level right there. Okay? So if that's the case, when I look down, see my horizon line? It's just going out of my field of vision right now, right? And at the bottom of my field of vision is half of the box down here. So I'll just put my finger down here. So I'm going to continue my camera down to this position here. See where my finger is? Okay, my finger is right there. So I've moved 2 fields down, which means that basically my horizon line is going to be 11 inches off my sheet of paper. If my sheet of paper that I'm drawing with here is 11 by 17, the height of it is 11 inches, so therefore from my horizon line, which was up here, from here, okay, to this position here, that's 11 inches. When I bring it down to here, okay, that's the top of my sheet of paper. So it's 11 inches above my sheet of paper is where my horizon line is going to be, to get this view here. Now what I want you to try and avoid doing is doing this with your camera angle or your field of vision. Don't do this. Okay? Don't go down to a low horizon line where you're flattening out the top surface so that you can barely see any detail on it. And don't do this. Okay? Don't bring it down so that the horizon line is running right through the middle of the object so that we can't see the top of it. All right? I don't want that type of a point of view. I want you to bring it up so that you can see a substantial amount of the surface, the top surface. So you're going to see 3 edges of your object. So in this case here, I'm seeing the top, I'm seeing this side here, and I'm seeing this side over here. All right? So I've got 3 edges. So the next step that I'm going to do, I'm going to take my object, and this is why I gave you 2 sheets of paper. Take your object and place it flat on your sheet of paper, and I want you to trace an outline of the object. Any little cutout areas, draw them in as well. And if you want to, you can make little markers, like sometimes things like this are jutting out, so they'll make a little bump on there. So I'm just going to give myself some little markers here. I know where that is. Where that is. Okay, so when I take it off now, I have a silhouette view of my stapler gun. And the next step, once I've done that, is I'm going to package it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to extend my lines as though I'm putting the object into a box. I'm just going to look for other landmark lines. And then you can do the same thing vertically. So these lines are just little guides, like a grid, to give me an understanding of where the different parts of the object are. And I can use this now as the basis for my first plane that I'm going to draw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this now off of here, and I'm just going to set it in the orientation that my object was set up on my desk. So what I've got is this now. So when I place my object onto it, I end up with the exact same orientation that I want to be drawing my object from my point of view where I'm sitting. So if I take the object off, I can now see the flattened out plan view of where my object is sitting. Pull out your L7 field of vision. Okay. For me right now, the camera is my L7 field of vision. Okay. What you see on screen is the field of vision. Okay, so look at your object, whatever your object is, using your L7 field of vision. And what you need to do is you need to determine where some of your lines are within your field of vision. So if I line this up like this, I can see exactly where the bottom part of my ruler here is cutting through my field of vision. Now my field of vision is my sheet of paper, my 11 by 17 sheet of paper. So I can see that it's just over a little bit from the center of the field, which is right here. It's just over a little bit. So then I know how to line up that line on my sheet of paper when I go to draw it here. Here's my sheet of paper. Here's the center of the sheet of paper. So I'm just going to go over to the side just a little bit over here and get the angle to match up to the angle that I had over here when I'm looking at it there. Okay? So I look at this angle and I look at the bottom of my field, and I determine what kind of an angle is that. If I go straight up and down like this, that's 90 degrees. If I go across like this, that's not quite 45. 45 would be roughly about there. Okay, so this is about 50 degrees right there. And then I look at my opposite angle over here and determine what that angle is on the opposite side. Okay. So that's more than or less than 45 degrees. I would say that's more around like 35 degrees over on the other side. All right. So, back to my sheet of paper now. From center, I'm going to go over a little bit. Get my angle. And draw it on there. Then I get my other angle, which was more like a 35-degree angle. Which was more about, and I'm looking over at my drawing right now to get that angle based on what I saw, which is roughly about there. So, ta-da! I now have my two angles with the front corner of my object here. These two lines here are going off to my vanishing points, which are on my horizon line, which is 11 inches, right there is 11 inches, above my sheet of paper. So they're way the heck off the paper. Okay, there's no point in even trying to plot them. I just know that they're out there somewhere in outer space. Okay. So now my next step is the same thing that we did previously when we were drawing our rooms. We have to determine what's the size of the object that we're drawing. So we have the front corner that's closest to us. In this case here, when I had my object orientated like this, that would be the corner that's roughly about here. Okay. So I have to determine what's this length right here. What's that distance that I'm going to place on my drawing here. Now what I could do is I could just take my object and rotate it and stick it right on there. Ta-da! And there's sort of my angle. But the perspective is kind of weird because this line here is going out on a different angle. So it's not quite the proper setup. Okay. So I figure out what this angle here is that I'm looking at, determine where the end of my object is going to be, and where the other end of my object is going to be over here. And simply draw that on. Say boink and boink. Those are the two positions. Okay. So now if I've determined that these are the endpoints of my objects, I now have my 3 corners for my object. What I can do is I can take this line here back to my vanishing point, the one that's way the heck off there, and I simply have to line up my ruler like this and determine whether or not it looks like it's going in the right direction. Okay, so you have to remember that the distance here has to be greater than the distance over here in order for it to be proper perspective. Okay, if my line is going like this, it's wider up here and smaller down here, therefore my perspective is inverted. Okay, something that's closer to you is larger, something that's further away is smaller. This edge here is closer to me, so I have to simply figure out what's that angle there. Okay, you don't want to make it too pinched, okay, because what that does is that drops your vanishing point down to just off the edge of my sheet of paper. Okay, if I take this and put it through, it'll connect right to there. So now my horizon line is on my sheet of paper and my vanishing point is really close, which is going to distort my perspective. So I just need to slide this up a little bit further until it gets to about there. Drop the line down. Okay. Then I connect this side over here and I do the same thing. That's way too wide, so I got to bring it down. That's close, but not quite right. It's flaring just a little bit. I don't want to make it parallel. Okay. You don't want to get into parallel perspective here. You want it actually to go to a vanishing point. So I'm just going to pull it down until it starts to feel like it's going to the right spot. So once I've got it there, drop my line in. And now I sit back and I gaze in wonderment at the beautiful drawing that I've just completed, which is my 2-point perspective plane. And I ask myself the question, does this look right? Is this what I want? I've expended approximately, if I hadn't been talking and explaining everything here, I've expended approximately 20 seconds of my life in drawing these 4 lines, 5 seconds per line, which is being rather generous as well. Okay? So getting to this point, you ask yourself the question, does this look the way I want it to look? Does it look right? So how do you know? Take a glance over at your object. Look at your object, look at your drawing, look at your object, look at your drawing, look at your object, look at your drawing, look at your drawing, back and forth until you can see whether or not they look the same. If they don't look the same, then ask yourself the question, well, which line is wrong? Or are all the lines wrong? Is this angle incorrect here? Is this endpoint too short or too long? Is this too big or too small? Did I make these 2 lines crimp in too much or too far away? Same thing with these 2. Okay? It's all aesthetics, judgment calls. Does it look right? Because in the end, when you present your drawing to me or to someone else, they're either going to look at it and go, hey, that's a pretty good drawing. That looks good. Looks right. Based on everything that I know about perspective and the way things should look, that looks right. Or they're going to go, something weird about that. Wow, that's not doing the right thing. That's wrong. Okay? Nobody's going to take out a ruler. Nobody's going to measure anything. Nobody's going to take out a compass to figure out your angles or anything like that. They're just going to accept it whether or not it looks right. So you make judgment calls. Is it right? Is it wrong? And so here's where we get into the realm of you have to start using your eyeballs to see whether or not things look the way they actually are. So you've got an object sitting right in front of you. It's right there. It's posing for you. All you got to do is draw it the way it looks. Okay? So you follow your basic perspective rules, which are lines can only go in 3 directions. Okay? Whether you're doing 1-point perspective or 2-point perspective. My lines here at this point have only gone in 2 different directions. To this vanishing point for this line, and to this vanishing point for that line and that line. But I've got a flat surface. Okay? I need to add some dimension to it. So my problem here is that I have a flat object in space that's sitting here like this. What I need to do is I need to create this line right here. This line, this line, this line, the line that's up here, the line that's over here. And those lines are all going straight up and down. Okay, so from my 4 corners, I draw my lines all straight up and down. So now I got to make another judgment call. based on the proportions that I've created here, the length to the height to this portion here, which is the depth, I guess. We'll call this depth. This will be the height. What's the proportion of that to this? Is that right? Is that right? That's close, right? Okay, so you make a judgment call. Does it look right? Okay, yay, I win. Okay, so now you move on to your next stage. I've got a point here now. I have 3 directions my line can go in, straight up and down. I've done that. To that vanishing point, haven't done that yet. So I got to go from that point across here. And so now I've got to, again, make sure that this is going to the proper vanishing point. That's wrong. See how it's getting thicker up here than it is over here? So I got to crimp it down a little bit. Okay, but I can't crimp it down too much. It can't come down like this, because then it's going to go weird to this line back here. It's going to a different vanishing point. So you've got to marry the two of them up and figure out where is that other point. So you draw a line, pull your pencil away, and you ask yourself the question, does this look right? Okay. If it's wrong, change it. Slide the line up a little bit. Shift it until it looks correct. Okay. Step back, look at it, say to yourself, does this look right? Yes or no? Move on to the next line. Draw your line across here. Remember that this is going further back, but it's also got to be going to the vanishing point that this one's going to, so you got to be careful. Does it look right? If you're happy with that, go on to your next line. Does it look right? If you're happy with it, go on to the next line. We connect these 2 points together. If you are wrong at this stage, right at this point, then everything else is going to be wrong. If you've made the object too long and too thin, you can put all the details you want onto it, spend another hour and a half drawing it, but when you look back at the object, you're going to say, that's too long and not wide enough. Oh, I guess I just wasted all that time. Why not make sure that it's correct here? Okay? 12 lines, simple ones. If it's not correct here, don't move forward. All right? So simple stuff, really simple stuff. Okay? That's the basis. Everything else from this point on is just details. So now I can pull my orthographic view that I did here, and I can use this as my guide to figure out where all my marks are. So something like this, I'll just pull this over here. Okay, here's my original box. Okay, from this point here up to this point here, that's the height that's represented here. The width that's here is this length here. So if I look at that, if I come down just a little bit inside of that, then that's my halfway point right there to where my handle is going to be. So I need another box opened up here in order to put my handle onto it. So my handle just happens to be pointing at me in this direction here, coming almost straight towards me. So I could visually say to myself, well, if it's sitting in this orientation right there, stick it inside the box roughly there, okay? See how the handle's coming down towards me here, which means it's going to line up to roughly about that point, and it connects up into, that's where that line is there. So I've got those 2 points now that I can use as reference. If that's where the back of the handle is going to go, the handle is going to come towards me in this direction here, like that. Okay. So that gives me a series of markers now where if I drop from this point here down in perspective, across in perspective, that's going to give me the high point of that little hump right there, which is further down here. Okay. So little markers like that can help you to guide and figure out where exactly all your stuff is. So you can see this part here, this square here, is more of a rectangle. It's just below the halfway point. So if I look at my halfway point in here, there's my halfway point. So if I go down just a little bit further here, to about this point here. And I use my perspective. Across like this. And this, I look at my halfway point roughly about there. There's a quarter, so it's just a little bit beyond a quarter. So there's my half point. There's my quarter. It's just a little bit beyond that point. So again, in perspective, that would be that little square right there on that top surface. Okay. So I can use all these things to describe where these various lines are. There's a line that goes across there that is this line here, which actually extends all the way up. Oops, actually it just goes to the point of the height there, sorry. So that would go to that point right there. And actually, no, I'd have to come out a little bit further. So again, I'm making visual judgment calls as to where all these various points are on my object as I go along. Okay? So find those markers on your floor plan and visually decide where these lines are going to go, and then just start adding the detail onto it. Okay? So it's just like using a grid that we did last week with the two-point perspective room. It's just now we're using the object. All right? So I'll let you guys go to it. I'm going to draw my object here. You guys draw your objects.